We put our hands in paint and put our hand prints on the wall. We painted the words to our favorite camp songs on another wall. A dear friend wrote a poem that was inscribed under our hands. It was senior high youth group at First Methodist Sapulpa, circa 1986. We were claiming our time and our room, and we were awesome. And a number of years back, I got word that it was all coming down. A new vision for children and youth ministry required that all the walls be painted. There were going to be murals in the hallways, and each classroom would have a different theme. It's a neat vision, right? I was cranky about it. At the same time, I heard that the sanctuary was being rearranged, placing the choir and the organ and the piano in a new location. Ostensibly, this was supposed to be better for sound and would improve logistics for worship. Sounds reasonable, right? I wasn't happy. Did it matter that I hadn't lived in the same time zone as my home church for more than 10 years? No. I didn't want what I had created to change. I didn't want the space that I loved and that had held me in worship throughout my childhood and teens to ever be different. What is that about? Why do so many of us get bogged down in trying to keep things from changing? I imagine it has something to do with our fear of loss, our fear of being disconnected from a place or community that's significant in our lives. Perhaps our death grip on the way things have always been, whether that is at church, at home, in a relationship, at work, or wherever, has something to do with our fear that the things we value, the things that have given us a sense of meaning, a sense of belonging, will disappear. Do you hear the common denominator here? Fear. Unfortunately, when we learn that something is going to happen that we find difficult or undesirable or scary, fear tries to wage a hostile takeover. Fear can paralyze us so that we find ourselves checking out of a situation. But it can also kick us into an overzealous campaign to firm up our place and position and safety. It seems the latter is what happened to Jesus' disciples when confronted with the fact that Jesus was going to be killed. They didn't understand what he was talking about when he went on about that dying and rising stuff. And in their confusion or denial or fear, they start trying to firm up their own position. Who's the greatest among us? The disciples' response is, of course, in direct opposition to what Jesus is trying to reveal to them, namely that everything is changing. Not only is Jesus going to die, but the familiar paradigms of power and honor that they're busy arguing about, all that is changing too. The impulse to seize power or to jockey for position in order to get attention or respect or accolades is a vestige of the old ways. The new vision, or perhaps better stated, the old vision fully revealed in Jesus, is that real power, life-giving power, is found in vulnerability, in humility, in welcoming and serving those who cannot reciprocate or offer us anything other than themselves. A child, lovingly lifted up by Jesus so as to put flesh and blood on his point, has no power to help us ascend the ladder of success. A child has no clout or pull, can't get us VIP seats or free tickets. A child doesn't have the capacity to make us more money or to make us more popular or to improve our standing in society. What Jesus teaches is that greatness in the kingdom is measured not by how we welcome the important people, but how we welcome those who have nothing to offer. Greatness, according to Christ, is measured not by how high we climb, but how humbly we serve. Regardless of whether we hold a position of power and authority in the world, or if we serve in a role that others might deem inconsequential, the call is the same. Greatness in the kingdom is to love and welcome and support others, especially the vulnerable, without the expectation that it will get us anything in return. Wait, it's not about quid pro quo and what can I get for myself. It's not just the first disciples who have a hard time getting this. The feelings I had about the demolition of my church spaces were wrapped up in the "it's all about me" syndrome. It's so easy to get caught in this self-focused, self-serving mode if we lose sight of what it's really all about. Jesus says that our lives, and most certainly our churches, are to be focused on loving and serving others. When we forget this, it's very tempting to think that the church should be focused primarily on serving me. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't expect to receive the gifts that we covenant to share when we become part of the church. But the point is that in the church, it is never all about me. In the church, it's all about Christ. It's about loving and serving others in a way that truly reflects Christ's way of self-giving, self-sacrificing love and service. Several years ago, the congregation I serve went through a major renovation project to make our old building more welcoming and suited to current ministries. The first steps were abatement, that is, getting rid of dangerous or unwanted stuff in the building like asbestos, and then demolition. Things didn't just get painted over, walls came tumbling down. Now, as you might imagine, during the process, community life became increasingly complicated. We lost access to things. Spaces that held precious memories were no longer there in the same way. Folks' comfort was challenged. Things changed. It was a learning time, a challenging time, a time for us as a congregation to try to stay focused on what all this mess was really about. We know, don't we, that it's one thing to talk about change and quite another to live through it. The way to travel faithfully through real change, the kind of change that excites our fears and our anxiety, is to keep focused on the goal and to remember that it's all part of a reality much larger than our individual experience. Jesus shows us how it's done. The goal is humble service, to live with love and compassion, to be willing to sacrifice everything in order to show and share and be God's love in the world. The pattern, the big picture, is life, death, and resurrection. In every change, in every loss, in every moment when cherished spaces or even our lives are falling apart, remember that God is brilliant at the whole new life thing. We don't need to be afraid. We don't need to scurry around trying to secure our place in the world. Our place is already secure in God's heart. And so our job is to humbly serve. When we focus on serving others, offering our best gifts, extending the welcome and sharing the blessings we ourselves have received, sometimes we have to let go of things. When we make humble service the primary goal, then sometimes our ego has to die, or our great plans have to be surrendered, or our own comfort has to be sacrificed. But Jesus shows us that self-giving love and service leads to new and true life. Life, death, resurrection. New life is the benefit of demolition. Clearing out dangerous and unwanted stuff, that abatement work, leads to greater health and wholeness in our buildings and in our lives. Tearing down walls and structures and ways of living that no longer serve us or others, that demolition business opens up space for new life to emerge. It happens in our lives. It happens in our church, not just once, but again and again as we try to live after the example of Jesus. A couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to walk through the halls and rooms and sanctuary of my childhood church. My handprint was no longer visible on the youth room wall, but what replaced it is a truly inspiring education space that's been welcoming the children of that church for years now. The space where the repositioned organ used to be was opened up to allow the baptismal font to be placed in front of the stained glass window depicting Jesus' own baptism, and to provide space for families to gather around as the child, youth, or adult is baptized. The church has also built an amazing addition with much larger and more exciting spaces for the junior and senior high youth to gather. What amazing benefits have been born out of the demolition of the old ways for the sake of a new vision focused on welcoming and serving others. No matter the abatement or demolition happening in your life or your church, you're invited to remember what it's all about. It's about loving and serving others. It's about letting go of some things in order to create space for new life to emerge. It's about sacrificing our own comfort for the sake of welcoming all of God's children. And I trust that you will move into the changes and challenges of this season of your life with generosity and grace, and will reap the extraordinary benefits of purpose, hope, and even resurrection.